Hello again, Gym Bats. This week's video is the yoga series that I promised you last week. It is full of all the flexibility moves that I showed you last week, as well as a few strength and balance training moves, basic yoga stuff. It is worth noting before we get started that while I love yoga, and just absolutely adore doing yoga, I am not a yoga instructor. I'm a personal trainer. And in fact, filming the instructional part of this video has been very educational for me in terms of looking at what I've been doing wrong and all of that. So just take everything with a tiny little grain of salt. It is a great routine. I stand by it. But should you see a discrepancy in what I'm doing versus what I'm saying is right. Enjoy.
Stand in mountain pose, feet firmly planted, shoulders, hips, and ankles in alignment. When you take your next inhalation, bring your arms up over your head and pull yourself into a backward bend. Careful not to bend any further back than you can and still comfortably breathe. On your next exhale, allow yourself to fold forward into forward bend. Careful not to round your back. Let your arms hang loose, or if you are more comfortable, bring them up into ragdoll pose, clasping each elbow in each hand. Step your left leg back into lunge pose. Stay with your hands down or bring them up onto your knee if that is comfortable for you. Bring them into prayer pose at your chest or above your head, again if that is comfortable for you and you feel secure there. Bring your hands back down and step your right leg back into plank pose. Careful to keep your spine and neck neutral and straight. Hold this pose for a few breaths and then drop to your knees and down to the floor. Here, be careful to keep your shoulder blades pulled together, up and back, as if you're trying to touch your elbows to each other without lifting your hands off the floor. On your next inhale, bring yourself up into cobra pose. Careful here that you only come up as far as your core muscles allow. Don't push yourself up with your hands. Take a few breaths in here, and then bring yourself up onto all fours and into downward dog. Keep your spine straight and neutral, your legs as straight as you can. Try and hit the floor with the heels of your feet. Move from one leg to the other for an additional stretch if your heels do not touch the floor. Bring your left leg forward for a lunge on the opposite side as the one we just did. Again, come up onto your knee or into prayer pose if that is comfortable and stable for you. Careful not to let your knee come out beyond your ankle. Step your back leg forward and come into forward bend. Again, careful to keep your spine straight and elongated. Hands dangling or up into ragdoll position as is most comfortable for you. Come up on your next inhale into that backward bend. Once again, careful not to go any further than you can comfortably breathe. Bring your hands down into prayer position. Take a moment here, pressing your palms together, creating tension in your arms. Standing firm, your feet planted, all four corners pressing into the earth. And then step out into a wide stance. Bring your arms level with your shoulders. Turn your right foot out and bend so the knee is directly above the ankle. Turn your head out over your right hand. Hold warrior two. And then come down into triangle. Careful not to lose your balance. Look up at the hand that's in the air. Keep both legs straight. Feel that stretch. If you need to, use a yoga block under your right hand. And then come back up. Square your feet forward again. And bring yourself into palm tree pose, really feeling that stretch through your side, along your arm. Come back up, shoulders level with your hands. Turn your left foot out, bring your knee over that ankle, and bring yourself once again into Warrior Two. Hold this pose for a few breaths, and then come down into Triangle Pose. Once again, if you need to, please use a yoga block or some similar form of support under your lower hand. This will make you more stable by raising you up, and it will require less of a stretch. Once again, upright, feet squared, and back into palm tree pose on the other side. Careful not to put any pressure on your knee. If that's where your lower hand happens to fall, that's fine. Just make sure you're not putting any pressure on that knee joint. Really feel that stretch. And then come down into a modified forward bend. Try not to put too much pressure on your palms on the floor. And just really feel the stretch through the back and inner thighs. After a few breaths, come up into prayer pose. Moving now to the floor, you do a single seated leg stretch. Bring your right hand out to your right toes. And if you want an additional twist and stretch on the back and side, bring your left hand up over your right hand. Hold this for a few breaths and switch sides, bringing your left foot to the inner thigh of your right leg. Once again, bring both hands out to those toes for a stretch all along the back of your leg and through your side and back. Bring both feet together, the soles of the feet together, as close to your torso as you can. And then hinging at the hips, careful to keep the spine elongated. Lean forward into that. And really get the most out of this stretch. Open the hips up as much as you can. Come now into cow pose, putting one leg over the other. Get your yoga strap if you need it, as I do. And bring your hands behind you, clasping hands if you can, and using a yoga strap if you cannot. Hold this for a few minutes, a few breaths, I should say. And when you're ready, exhale and switch sides, bringing the opposite leg over and changing which hand is behind. Getting the most out of this stretch as possible. Hold this pose for a few breaths. Put away your yoga strap. Get yourself seated in a comfortable position and bring your arms into half eagle pose. Careful to keep your elbows away from the torso, getting the most out of this stretch. Keep your back straight, your spine elongated. Really feel that stretch through your shoulders. Switch sides, bringing the opposite arm above. Once again, make sure your elbows are out and away from your torso. Your spine is elongated and straight. Breathe deeply into this pose. And when you are ready, release and come out. Returning to your yoga strap, do a seated forward bend. using the yoga strap for a little extra oomph in your form. It's easy to round your back and touch your toes in this position. Much harder to do it with appropriate form with your spine straight. Use your yoga strap to make sure your form remains quality. Then come up into boat pose. Legs should be straight if you can, but bend them for a little additional balance if that is easier. And then come down into pigeon on your right side with your right leg out behind you. Breathe into this pose. Let your hips sink as far to the ground as is comfortable. After a few breaths, swing your right leg forward and your left leg back into pigeon on the other side. Once again, let your hips sink as far down as is comfortable. You may or may not hit the floor with your hips, and that's just fine. And when you're ready to come out of this pose, swing back around and lay down, hands at your sides in corpse pose. Breathe deeply here. Focus on your breath. This is the end of our yoga practice, a moment of quiet and stillness. Focus on your breath. Deep breaths, filling your lungs to capacity and emptying them of as much air as you physically can. And when you are ready, bring yourself back into a seated position, into prayer pose. Namaste.